Oh. Hey everybody, Summer Terry here, and welcome to the Superior Therapy booth, where we have teamed up for a great learning experience here at the BBR World Finals. And so we are here today. I've got a volunteer that's brought her horse, and so we are going to talk a little bit about how to do a muscle assessment. We're going to talk about preventing soft tissue injuries. I'm going to kind of go over like how I check a horse, and kind of from a bodywork perspective, and what we can do to improve our fitness on our barrel horses. So kind of give us the background here. How's your week been so far?
It's been pretty good. She's just not running. Her turns are great. We ran yesterday. She's just not stretching out and actually running.
Okay. Was she working good prior to coming here? Or?
Yeah, she's working pretty good.
Okay.
So she just did not fire.
Okay. All righty. So tell me a little bit about, before we go to the assessment, tell me a little bit about the fitness, what you normally do.
I usually ride her for about, say, 30 to 45 minutes. That's about a mile of walking, 2 miles of trotting, about half a mile of loping, and then cleaning off about a mile or two. So
Okay.
we do that pretty regularly every day.
Okay. So whenever I do a muscle assessment, you're going to kind of step over here. We're going to start with finding our center balance point of the horse. And so you can use this assessment if you are, concerned about your fitness or concerned about soreness with your own horse. You can also use it like if you're looking for a horse to purchase. A lot of the little tips that I'm going to tell you in this live can also be used for looking for potential horses or looking at a prospect. So whenever we go to find our central balance point on our horse, it's going to be right here behind the withers, kind of about where your cinch is going to set. And so when we step back and look at a horse, we want that horse to be as equally as balanced on the front half of the horse as on the back half. Now some therapies that you will see, or some therapists, they will actually cut the horse into thirds and they evaluate the midsection. You can do that. There's nothing wrong with that. I have found just by looking at the horse in halves, I can tell a lot about what's going on. And so, how old is this horse?
She's 11.
She's 11. Okay. So, I'm going to flip her mane over here. That way we can kind of see the neck as we're going through this assessment. One thing that kind of stands out to me a little bit right here at the beginning is the change in the tissue right here, right before where her vertebrae are going to start. So our cervical runs down, ties into the neck. Our thoracic starts, the first one is hidden. And so T2 is actually going to be the first vertebrae that you can feel. And then we transition down into the lumbars, into the sacrum, and into the coccyx. And so when I see a horse that has this little bit of a dip right here, a lot of times that's indicative of a horse that's kind of hollowing their back and usually kind of elevating their head. So you said like her turns have been really good, but maybe has she had as much power in her turns as what she normally has?
Yeah.
Okay. So that would kind of be the first thing that would make me think like, okay, there may be a little bit of hind end weakness that's kind of radiating up and causing her to have to overcompensate. And so then when I do my muscle assessment, I'm going to basically take a little dowel and I'm going to go right down the top of the neck. And so whenever I'm doing this, I'm checking for any pain or any flinching in the muscle. And so my next pass is going to be right through the middle of the neck. If I get a reaction somewhere, I'll go back and go over that spot. So far I've gotten nothing. My third pass is going to be right over the vertebrae. I don't really get a lot there until I get down to this muscle here. So brachiocephalus, it lifts the leg. It also can be a hoof point. So if I have a horse that's sore through here, I'm going to make sure that I'm also checking my feet and the angles of my hooves and how the horse is shod. So this has kind of been the first point that we've gotten any soreness. And so from there, I'm going to just kind of go down the belly of the muscle here on the shoulder. I'm going to make 3 passes down the shoulder. Now there, I don't really get much from it. So that's making me think, there may not be anything actually down in the foot. That may be a bit of an overcompensation. And now I'm going to go ahead, check the back and check the hips, and then we'll come back to the front end to look. So my first pass down the back is going to be just right to the side of the spine. You don't want to go over the spine. Second pass is going to be just a little farther out, which is going to be between the rib shelf and the vertebrae, right down the middle. And then the third pass is going to be down the rib shelf. And I don't get a lot there. I see a little bit of spasm, but I don't really get a lot of feedback there either. So then I'm going to go, my first pass on the hip is going to be right by the SI. So right there we start to see some soreness. And then this is going to help be right down the middle. That's going to also possibly be into my stifle area. I have referral pain coming from my stifle. So we've got some issue there. Now, just because your horse is sore here, and it can be referral pain from a stifle, doesn't necessarily mean that it is. That's one thing that I feel like is a misconception about using acupuncture points. Everybody wants to just use that point and think, oh, this horse is sore, and that's the only diagnostic you need to do. And that's not true, because I'm looking at the muscle tissue here. So then I've got to decide, do I have referral pain, or do I just simply have pain in that muscle? And so my third path I'm going to take will kind of show us a little bit of the hock region, as well as the rest of the muscle structure in the hip. So a little bit there. And then I'm going to kind of run down this crease here and see if I get any feedback. Nothing really in that area. So these are also stifle points through here. Hock points are right here. So I get nothing on any of my acupuncture points there. It's not going to hurt. I'm going to go ahead and check the stifle, make sure that I don't have any fluid on it. I don't feel any popping. I don't feel anything out of the ordinary here. So that's going to lead me to think that this may simply be a fitness issue in this muscle here. So then if you'll turn her around, we'll go to the other side and check. So now looking at this side, one of the first things I see before I even palpate is this, how tight and overbuilt she is on this side. So when we look at horses, we're looking at a diagonal. So if we have weakness on this side of the hip, we're going to have more weakness on the front in the shoulder. And so I would immediately kind of think we're probably going to have more reactivity in this neck, and we're going to have more soreness. But when you start to see these tight bands of tissue come through here, and even like the little wave that I can almost trace, those type of things are what lead up to having soft tissue injuries. So we have no muscle in the lower leg. So from the knee down, we have no muscle. And whenever this starts to contract and starts to get really tight, it pulls on the soft tissue below. And so just like a tow rope, you can only pull on that so many times before it starts to fray. And then when it starts to fray and you continue to pull on it, your tow rope is going to break. And so that's where one of the things that we see most commonly as a body worker before we ever get to a point of having a suspensory issue or a tear. And so, you have your owners that are always completely surprised whenever they end up with an injury, but most of the time the body work of your horse is going to tell you that you're headed in that direction months before it ever happens. So to kind of continue along with checking our horse here, I'm going to start and I'm going to repeat. She's already a little more sensitive on this side. So anytime we have an issue with our sacral alignment or anything like that, we're typically going to also see it in C1. You see that with people. Anytime you have a sacral misalignment, typically you're going to have pain in the top of the neck. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of continue here. So she's pretty sensitive. Not a whole lot till we get down to that tight muscle. So now there's a little more there because you see she leans away from me. And then now I'm going to go over the vertebrae, and I get a little bit more reactivity at the base of the shoulder. So I think a lot of her non-performance is going to be not being able to get her front end out of the way because we have a lot of restricted movement here. But also, too, to be able to get the front end out of the way, we've got to have enough power in the behind to push the front end. So then kind of continuing, so went down this drive line here. Again, we were sore on this point here. So just because those are hook points doesn't necessarily mean we have a faulty shoe job. What it can mean is she's carrying extra weight on her front end trying to offload her hind end. And so now we're going to make our 3 passes down the shoulder. Not a lot of reactivity there. Again, if we had a lot of foot pain, we would show some reactivity, I feel like, coming up from the foot. And she's actually pretty loose there. So most of our tightness and our tension that we're seeing is at the top of this gap. So the other thing I noticed right here is she has some overbuilding in that wither area, which is going to cause some soreness. That typically comes from having a weaker hind end. And so now we're going to go back down the back. And so we're actually a little bit more sore on this side in that lumbar region. And so the third pass is going to be right over the top of the rib shelf. So we're definitely seeing some lumbar lower back issue. And so now we're going to go over the hip. So she was less reactive on this hip. Not a lot of reactivity there, just a little bit when I get back to the back. Not a lot of reactivity there. And so again, I'm going to go down my crease and kind of hit my acupuncture points there. And I don't feel it. So basically, this is coming from the diagonal. So she has soreness on this side, and it's coming up this diagonal and coming into the shoulder. Also all the way up to C1 and to the pulse. So now that we've kind of made an assessment here on maybe what we need to do with body work, we can also make a plan for exercise to try to change and improve our exercise routine to help balance this out. Because like another thing that we look at, so like when you look at this mare from behind, she appears to be higher on this shoulder, but that's a little bit of an illusion. The reason she appears to be taller on this shoulder is simply because she's picking this leg up higher and she has a muscle structure that's overbuilt, not because there's actually a difference in her leg lengths. Sometimes you can have a horse that has high-low in the feet, and that will cause stuff like that as well. But in her case, I think we just have some overbuilding. And so we will take this mare and do some stretches and kind of see where we're at as far as range of motion and movement. And so another thing that I would think about with her exercise, do you do any, like going over pole, any core activation? So I think with this mare, you would start to really see this hind end build just by going over poles, going over cavalettis, doing a lot of backing. Because the stronger we can make the hind end, we're going to be able to take the pressure off. And then through body work, you're going to be able to get rid of that muscle tension that's happening in the shoulders because she's going to be able to fire harder with her hind end. And so like when we talk about a horse taking a lead, most people don't even realize what body mechanics it takes for a horse to take a lead. So for this horse to be able to go into the right lead, our left glute has to activate and the core has to activate. So as the glute activates, it's going to push that leg into the lead that we're trying to take. So a lot of times when you see a shortened stride, it's because the offside is not strong enough to push that horse into the lead. And so then we start to see that barrel turn where they kick their hip out and they're really disengaged and we have no core engagement at all. So like one of the stretches that we would do with this mare would be doing some belly lifts. And so look at how just asking her to do a belly lift, get her to kind of lift a little more and see she lifts easier on this side than on this side. And so this is going to be something that you kind of have to work with her to see if we can bring her core up farther, you're gonna have one, you're gonna have a lot better place to put your saddle, but then also two, it gets rid of your over muscling that's happening right here. And so, just like us, to do a kind of a demonstration, if I can get back where you can see my feet in there. So if you think about how you would walk, if you're horse engaged and you're squeezing your glutes and you're taking a step, you can take a big stride. Where if you are slouching and like you have your belly out and you try to walk, your stride is actually a lot shorter even on yourself. And so that's where having that core engagement really helps those horses break forward and fire harder. And so other things on like preventing your soft tissue injuries, when we get down here to the leg, if you have a horse that has a lot of tight muscle structure going into the leg at rest, that would be something that I would start to look at the fitness. I would start to look higher up on the shoulder. Again, this mare doesn't have any of that, so that's great that we're not at risk for any soft tissue injuries at the moment. But as this continues to progress and get tighter and tighter and tighter, eventually you're going to start to see these deep creases through these muscles because these muscles are staying contracted even at rest. And so then as that starts to draw up, then it will start to draw on your tendons and ligaments. And so if you've seen any horses that, you know, you can just really, really see that soft tissue and it looks really tight, usually it's coming from the muscle of the butt. And so now to do some range of motion stretches with her. When we are stretching a horse that has not been warmed up, we're basically checking for range of motion. You're not going to get a huge, big, pretty extension most of the time, especially if a horse is not used to being stretched, if they're not warmed up. But we can still see the areas of resistance. So when I pick this leg up, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of work that hoof up and down. And what I'm checking for there is just to see how well the pastern joint moves and see if I have any pain in that area. And actually she has a little bit of clicking kind of in that joint, so there may be a little inflammation there. We've all been stalled on concrete for 3 days here, so some of that, as I continue to work, the clicking goes away. So it may just be that she is bearing a little more weight on her front feet. So then the next stretch I'm going to do is I'm going to bend the leg up, and I'm going to just kind of push the leg back, and I'm going to see, and I'm just kind of watching for my movement in my shoulder. And so you can actually see as the leg comes back, she starts to hollow out a little bit more. And it's going to be hard to see on the video, but I'm watching the spasm happen right here through this back. And so that's telling me that, you know, this stretch is going to be a little bit difficult for her. And I'm not really asking for a whole big stretch either. And so the next one I'm going to do to check our range of motion is I'm going to cross this knee over, or cross this hook over the knee. And so that one's actually really hard for her, and she's not wanting to open this shoulder up. So she should be able to cross that completely over. And so right there, she's kind of telling me like, hey, this is really hard on my shoulder. And so then if I try to kind of maneuver this and bring her shoulder out, she gets a little bit uncomfortable. So that tells me, like with her, we would maybe do some knee circles. And we may have to go back and release some of this through body work first, and then go back to our range of motion. So now I'm going to ask her to come forward with the leg. And so what I'm going to be watching for is that she picks up that left thigh. She has to off-mark the diagonal as this leg comes forward. Because if she's strong, she should be able to extend into this stretch and not be uncomfortable. So right there, she relaxes and kind of gives it to me. And she's dropping a lot of weight on me. And I'm really not pulling on her. If you have a horse that wants to dump a bunch of weight on you and you can't hold them, you can go up here and ask them to bend their knee and ask them to take their weight back. So see how she's just getting heavier and she's starting to kind of sway a little bit? She's giving me all of her weight. So she's wanting to offload that hind instantly. So then now I'm going to go around to the other side and I'm going to run through the same stretches so you can see it from this side, and we're going to compare the two. So going back to checking from our range of motion here. And then I'm going to go and extend like that. Still have a little bit of spasming. Now look at the difference in opening that shoulder up. This side, she can open a lot wider than she could the other side. So we definitely, on this stretch, have proved that we have more restriction in the movement on the right front. And so now I'm going to ask her to bring this leg forward as well. And so look at how much easier she can bring this leg forward and stand on it. So I can even actually rock this leg back and forth a bit, and she doesn't get unstable on the hind like she did with the other front leg. So again, that tells me I'm going to think our weakest point is going to be our left hind. So then now I'm going to stretch my hind legs. And so my first stretch is going to be bringing this leg forward. And I always take note of how my horse picks up their foot. Like, did I have to really pull it up? Were they heavy? Are they leaning on me? And so she drops her ankle really nice. Like, so whenever I do this stretch, I want them to drop this ankle and really lean into the stretch, because then I get a really good pull on that soft tissue. And so my next stretch I'm going to do is going to really help open the pelvis. And so I'm going to ask her to just bring her leg out. And then ideally I would like for her to point her toe, kind of like a ballerina would. And then I'm going to just rock this leg back and forth. And then my next stretch is going to be straight back behind. And the thing that I want to keep in the back of my head whenever I do this stretch is, I'm going to sink down with the horse, and I'm going to ask her to really stretch and drop her heels for me. But then I'm going to see, where does his leg pull? So if I just kind of go with her the way that she wants to go, see how this leg kind of fades over? So now I'm going to take one step to the outside, and I'm going to open that pelvis again by bringing this leg straight out, one step to the outside. And then I'm going to go back to my center point and let her have her back. And now I'm going to turn her around and check the other side.
That exercise her pelvis walks up quite a bit.
Absolutely, yes.
That's
Yes, so whenever she's wanting to fade across like that, she's trying to kind of close everything off instead of having an open pelvis that's relaxed that she can actually widen.
okay.
So a lot of times when they're that tight like that, instead of really getting that barrel turn and being able to get wide and squat and have power, they will kind of be one step to the inside, and then when your ground doesn't hold, they stumble and they off-shift their weight. So sometimes those are the horses that you see where, 1 out of 50 has ground trouble and they're the only one that does. Typically it's a weakness in the hind end or it's a fitness issue. So now we're going to go back to this side here. And so she picks the leg up fairly well. And then we're going to see how well she comes forward. And so with this, I'm watching the shift of her right front to see if we're starting to get some instability. And so she's a lot heavier on this side through the stretch, but she's still able to do that one fairly well. And so even just me moving over here and picking her leg up, she is more restricted on how easily I can pick her leg up. So now we're going to bring this leg out. And she's staying pretty stable in the front. I can see her shifting her weight back and forth as I move this leg. Does she have any size under her shoulder in the front that you can see? Not really? So now she gets a little bit heavier on this one than she did on the other side. And then now we're going to come straight back. I'm going to let her relax a little bit. And we're going to come straight back with this leg. And see, this one immediately wants to pull to the inside. So I'm going to go ahead and let her stretch this way. And you can see she's much more uncomfortable with me working with this leg than she was with the other side. Girl. And so she lets me bring that out fairly well. Girl. So now I'm going to show how to do a hip stretch on this horse, and then I'm going to show you like bodywork techniques. So when we are wanting to, we're going to do a hip tuck. And so basically what I want her to do is I want her to arch and really open the spine. And I want her to start kind of dropping her pelvis and kind of shifting that back where it's not quite as flat. I want her to set a little more like this. And then through fitness, we're going to build this muscle up and have it a little more functional. That way she's got a lot more strength. And so if it's a horse I don't know, I will typically start my hip tuck from the side. And so I'll feel down until I find the end of the sacrum and where the coccyx starts. And then I'm just going to apply pressure and I'm going to ask her to bend up. And so you may want to move from this side, that way they can see the back. I don't know. And so you can see her pick up and stretch and see how that fills her back in, and it also brings her core up. And so you can do this a couple of times and she will get where she can hold this stretch longer the more you do it. Another way of doing this stretch is to use two dowels and pull on one side of the spine or the other and the other. If you don't know the horse, I suggest starting with this, because if you have a horse that's hock sore or stifle sore, they cannot take that stretch, so they will end up springing up out of it, and you don't want to get kicked. So if I'm going to use two dowels, I'm going to start right up here, and I'm just going to add pressure until she flattens her pelvis. So see it flatten? And then now I'm going to pull really, really slowly, and I'm going to ask her to just lean into that stretch. So you get a lot better stretch by using two dowels, but if it's a horse that's really, really reactive, always have caution, because you have to stand directly behind them. There's no way to do the two dowels and stand at the side, because you're not going to have even pressure on both sides of the pelvis. So when it's your own horse, you're going to know them and know whether they're having a good day or a bad day. Another thing that you can do is doing tail pulls. And so whenever I do a tail pull, I don't want to pull on the hair, and I don't want to pull on the very end of the tailbone. So I'm going to find the end of my tailbone, and then I'm going to go one hand holds above it. And then I'm just going to kind of sink my weight in. And actually you can see her spasming in the hip as I do this. You can also step to the side and kind of pull from an angle. And then I always go back to neutral, and then I will step to the other side. And so where she has to activate this side to stand up, she starts to spasm over here. You actually see a lot more spasming on this side. Going back to the exercise, the more you can back a horse, the more power they're going to have in their turns, the more stride they're going to have. We always get concerned about getting on and going forward with our horses, but backing is one of the best ways to take the tension off your hamstrings and off of these muscles that sometimes end up overbuilt. And you can also offload your psoas by reversing that horse. And then you're going to be able to build this hip and build this pelvis to really be able to accelerate forward. Another thing that we need to train on these barrel horses is our fast twitch muscle. And so the walking is great because the benefits of the walking that you do help with the spinal alignment. Just because your walk creates balance, it helps build your stabilizing muscles. So walking is absolutely great because it mobilizes everything throughout the horse. So I think just by adding the simple being able to pick up, it would be like you being on a stair stepper. So going over poles and things like that at a walk and a trot, because you don't want them to jump them. We want to do individual steps going over them. And then by backing, you're going to start to see all of this fill in here. And the thing you want to remember when you back them is kind of get some movement going. Like don't let them just drag their feet or swirl their feet around. You want to keep them moving. So then also we did the belly lift with her. That would be something that will really help this to fill in as well and to open that spine. And so now going back up to some of the body work stuff that we can do, I'm going to start on the side that is the least tense. And I will have my horse owners just go and just kind of hold over the top of the scapula. And you're going to find, anytime you find an area that's tight, you can just hold more pressure on it. You can also use like a dowel or something. You don't want to use a sharp end, you want to use a blunt end. Sometimes I'll have customers use like a lid of a Sharpie or something like that to just kind of activate these trigger points. And so when you get on a point that's sore, just kind of hold on it until you get a release. So I am not using a lot of pressure. I don't have a ton of pressure. I could use the same amount of pressure with my fingers. And you can just kind of hold on this until we get a release. And if your horse continues to stay agitated, you may have to move to another spot and then come back to the one that you're on. You can also do counterclockwise circles to help relax that muscle. So your compression is going to help release your endorphins on that trigger point, which is going to help the horse relax. And then your counterclockwise circles are going to relax the tissue. So if we were trying to stimulate the tissue, like if I was doing a pre-race treatment and I was trying to really stir and stimulate the tissue, I would go clockwise. You can also use kind of the heel of your hand, and what you will notice is these horses will kind of lean their weight into you. And so just by kind of finding these tight muscles and just starting to break them down, one, being able to recognize when your horse has tight areas is going to help you whenever you do hire a professional body worker or get somebody to work on your horse. You're going to kind of know the areas that actually need worked on. Because what I'm teaching isn't really a substitute for a professional that's worked on hundreds of horses, but it's something that you can do in between treatments at home. And so I'm basically just trying to get in back behind her shoulder blade because I need the scapula to be able to move better. And so after I get this muscle heated, I'm going to go back and we're going to do some circles with the knee, and I'm going to mobilize this area a bit more. Well, So when you find a spot that's tender, you're going to just continue to hold on it. And always just kind of keep a watch on how your horse is responding to the treatment. Again, if they don't relax, you may have to move to an area that is less sensitive and then work your way up. Which is also why I start on the offside of what I'm going to consider my problem area. Just because I want to get the area that's going to have the least pain released first before I step over to problem area. And so this is kind of a shortened version of what we do, but now I'm going to go back and I'm going to pick this leg up again. And so now I'm going to kind of bring that up and kind of rock it back and forth a bit. And kind of just try to mobilize his knee. And so I may have to go back and kind of work on the neck a bit more before I can get this to actually release like I need it to. Now I'm going to go kind of back to my knee circles. And part of why she's being resistant may be because she doesn't want to stand on this other front. So we may have to actually work that out and then come back to the stretches that we are doing here. Another thing to remember with your stretches, you don't want to force anything. So I'm not yanking and pulling on her. I'm just doing some gentle rocking, trying to get more movement into that shoulder. The other thing to remember is we decide the shoulder is secondary. So even if we get the shoulder where it's not as sore, because now it's moving better and she doesn't seem quite as reactive up here, as soon as this horse goes and runs again, this shoulder is going to be completely locked up like it was in the first place. And that's because our root issue is going to be taking the time to rebuild the fitness. So now she gets a big deep breath, we're less sore up here, so we've tackled one secondary problem. So I feel like whenever people, have EMS done, have cold laser stuff done, treatments, and their horse shows a lot of improvement with just one treatment, usually you're chasing secondary things. So again, as soon as she goes down the alleyway, this is going to tighten right back up probably in one run. And that's where once you get home from a show, you kind of do what you need to do at the show to keep your horse comfortable, and then you go home and try to tackle the root problem. And so coming back here to some things that we can do, I'm going to start kind of back here with this hip. I'm going to kind of go right through here, and I'm just going to palpate and feel. So we were a little bit sore right there. So I'm going to come back and just kind of hold pressure on that. And so I don't get just a ton, there's soreness here, but the good news is, I don't feel any tears. I don't feel anything that would alarm me about the joints. I think just adding some fitness in there is going to give back a lot more power. So she was really sore right there. Whenever I went just below that SI. So what I'm going to do here is to get some mobility, I'm going to pull her tail to me, and I'm going to just kind of rock back and forth as I'm holding down on the trigger point. And one video that I probably need to do would be using a massage gun safely. Because when you get back here from these big muscles, sometimes they're a lot for just a horse owner to tackle. And because they're so thick and it's such a big muscle group. And so this spot that I'm working here, you will see a lot of horses that have SI issues or that have had tears and sacral ligaments. This is one of the areas they really enjoy having worked on. And if you've got any questions coming through, like if there's any questions on there, I can answer and work at the same time.
I do have one. It's could she be sore if she is in season?
Absolutely. So with the ovaries, you will typically see more soreness in the back. You will also see it kind of triangle down into the flank area. So with her, I don't really get a lot of ovary pain with her, but absolutely. So again, kind of looking at this triangle here, whenever we're sore in that lumbar area right through here, and then all the way down into the very edge of the rib cage, those are usually pretty hot spots for ovaries. And so, I would kind of continue to work on this area with her. You could also, with this mare, do a hip stretch of just opening the pelvis this way. So she's already locked on and leaning her weight on me. And so I will just kind of try to hold pressure best I can while she's trying to sit on me. And so this helps to just open that pelvis up. And the horses usually love it. And it kind of allows them to stretch themselves. And so I'm not pushing straight on with her. I am actually pushing up against the muscle right here and letting her drop her weight onto the heel of my hand. And when you have one that really wants to lean on you, they get a little bit hard to hold. And then I can just kind of pulse back and forth here. Once she gets a steady, static hold on me, then I'm going to kind of just pulse back and forth and just let that kind of rock and open that pelvis up. You can see she has a little bit of a muscle spasm right there, which was the area that she was sore whenever I looked at her with my hand. And so those are kind of some things, and you can do everything I'm doing, you can do on both sides. I'm just trying to save a little bit of time here since we're on a lot. And so let's spin her around the other way and turn her head back over here. And I'll show you a few things that you can do on working on the top up towards the head, the top of the neck. So same thing that we did with the other side there. I'm going to check for sore points. She's pretty sore right at the top of the scapula. She's pretty sore coming in where the leg ties in. So over here we have a lot more tension in that muscle structure. Again, even though I'm working on this, like, you definitely want to work on your secondary issues, but you don't want to lose and have all of your focus being simply on the secondary issues, because we still have to get rid of the primary issues. But for today, we're going to kind of stretch her out and try to get some better performance out of her before the weekend's over. So on this side, she's pretty tense even back behind the scapula, more so than what we had on the other side. And so when I have a sore spot, I'm going to kind of just lock on and hold on it and just kind of see if I can get her to relax and release. Actually, I can feel her spasming in the back as I'm on this point. So whenever we talk about things that we look for in correct anatomy of our performance horses, a big muscle glute is going to be one of the first things you look for. And I have a lot of people say, oh, well, race horses don't have them. Well, we are not asking a racehorse to cut and make a turn. They're going straight. And a lot of times what I see, though, is whenever they are on the backside of the coming home on the straightaway, a lot of times they will switch to the outside lead. And it's kind of interesting, and probably everybody has their own theory on it, but when I was a kid, they always said, oh, when they switch leads, they're faster. Well, part of that may be the inconsistency in the balance of the way they're trained. you know, with our horses, we want to work in both directions, and we're trying to create balance where, you know, those race horses may end up being so weak in that right hind that they can swap and offload and use their left hind to power them down the straightaway. We see that a lot, like with the horses that we get in the pit with our underwater tread. Almost all of our race horses are short in the right front. And I think a lot of it has to do with the imbalance in how they're actually fitting versus what we do with our performance horses. And so whenever we're looking for a horse that we want to be a long-term winner, we want to have balance from the hind to the front end. We also want to have, you know, a short top line if possible and a long underline. The longer you have, the longer the back is, the harder it's going to be to keep that core strong. It doesn't mean that you can't have a long back horse that's very, very successful. It just takes a different type of fitness. And you know, this mare, she made really, really nice. And to see how on this side, she's a lot more sore even as I transition back from the scapula. The other thing that I see with people is, you know, like if you were having issues with her being sore in her withers, it's not uncommon for somebody to say, oh, I don't know if my saddle fits, I'm going to go purchase a new saddle. Well, if you purchase a new saddle for the way her body is right now, and then you go home and you change your fitness, and her glutes build, and then this overbuilding in the withers goes away, now your new saddle doesn't fit either. Or I have the people that their horse has been on a break over the winter and they want to buy new equipment. Your equipment should be fitted to the horse in the best body condition that they can be to have the best fit. So it wouldn't surprise me, you know, chiropractically, if there was some rib issues and some vertebral alignment issues right here on this horse. But I think that this is something with body work that when we get these muscles to relax, everything's going to go back to the alignment that we need it to be. And so now that I've kind of worked on the top of the scapula a bit, there's another really tight spot. You can actually see how whenever I apply that pressure, see how it ribbons all the way down. You can see that tension radiating. So I would work this side just like I did the other side, and I would mobilize that plate and try to get as much movement in this leg as I can. So to save time on the video that we're doing, I'm going to jump up here and show just a few techniques. And they're going to be kind of along the same lines of just kind of finding your tight spot and holding it. Some horses are going to be a lot more compliant than others depending upon how much inflammation they have. Another thing to look at when you are searching for a prospect is looking at the face directly from the front and see, do they have an ear that seems higher than the other? Do they have one eye that appears higher than the other? Because if they do, that can mean that you have an alignment issue. I will also just check the TMJ. I'll put one hand on each side of the TMJ and see, are my fingers pretty balanced? Are they even, or do they set one side higher than the other? Another thing you can look at is right through here. You know, you can look at the front bones and just kind of see where that alignment is, because that's going to save you a lot of chiropractic. And I wouldn't necessarily pass on a horse that shows some misalignment, but you're going to know that you're going to have some maintenance to do if that horse isn't balanced. You can also kind of check on the TMJ, on the muscle structure, the Saturn muscle that comes down through here, and check for soreness, which could be a tooth issue, could be an alignment issue. Anytime there, and it can also just be like a person grits their teeth, a horse can clench and do the same thing if they're having pain somewhere else in the body. Reading the face of your horse is extremely important, of just knowing what their normal is and then knowing whenever there's an issue. So as I'm finding all of this tight muscle structure, I'm just kind of working back and forth over it and just kind of asking it to release. I see a lot of people that do like the carrot stretches and things, and those are also really good to have your horse bend and flex around and take a treat or take a piece of hay. But if you have a really tight muscle structure through here, they're going to tip their head instead of just turning it. And so I usually opt to do body work before I do any type of stretches like that, just because I want to have everything loosened up the most that I can. And then again, you can kind of go right in the front here and loosen that up as well. These are also really great for releasing endorphins. So if you are waiting, holding pin, getting ready to run, like in the next 20 or 30 runners, if you want to get some endorphin release and just kind of have a calm horse that's got a really fresh mind, you can just come and do just a light hold on the face and just kind of ask that horse to relax. You can also kind of hold on any of these spots that I've worked on the cheek, and that's going to help to get just a real nice endorphin relax. And so I'm trying to keep my pressure steady until I kind of see her eyes soften, and then she'll probably take a big deep breath and maybe even look and chew. Another thing you can do for a release is I will do an ear pull and do some ear circles. And so I'm not pulling on the ear itself, I'm actually putting my hand around the base of the ear, and then I'm just kind of lifting out, and then I can just kind of work it around. I can also lift up and take it in a circle. I can go circles both ways, and that's just going to help get tension out of the face. So this is something I used to do whenever I rode a bunch of young horses. Again, just trying to get that endorphin release before we go into a new situation that's going to be a little bit scary for them. And so kind of the same thing on the cheek. Just kind of holding when you find a tense muscle, just hold on it. These are also things that you can do before you take your horse to the chiropractor, because they're already going to be relaxed and they're going to hold that adjustment a lot better, and it's going to make it easier for your chiropractor to work on horse. So those are kind of just a few things there that we work on that our horse owners at home can do. So we're going to actually take her back there and do a bit more body work on her and try to get this to loosen up a bit more. But if y'all got questions, feel free to message the page. We are here through the end of the BBR. We are doing assessments, creating a fitness plan for your horse. We have body workers here. We're also showing how to wrap, how to ice, some other things that our horse owners can do at home to take care of their horses whenever they get on the road. So thanks for tuning in, y'all. Happy trails.